Have you ever noticed that some of the most financially stressed people you know are also some of the highest earners? And somewhere on the other end, there are people who seem almost quietly unbothered by money, not because they have endless amounts of it, but because of something harder to see, something in the way they've arranged their life. Stay with this video until the end, because by the time we finish, the way you think about financial security will have shifted in a way that's difficult to reverse. And that shift alone could be worth more than any single financial decision you'll make this year. Picture two people, both earning well, both, by most measures, doing fine. One of them checks their bank account multiple times a day. They feel a low hum of anxiety before every large expense. When their car needs repairs, there's a moment of genuine panic, not because they can't afford it, but because their money is always spoken for before it arrives. Their income is good, but the structure around it is tight. Every month feels like a negotiation with themselves. The other person isn't necessarily earning more. In some cases, they're earning less. But there's a quality to how they move through financial life that's noticeably different. They don't seem to be constantly solving a problem. When something unexpected happens, there's a pause, then a decision, not a crisis. They're not immune to financial pressure. They've simply built a life where that pressure doesn't get to dominate. Most people watching the first person would assume the solution is more income. And for the second person, they might assume they're just lucky, or perhaps secretly wealthy, in ways that aren't obvious. But when you look more carefully, what separates them isn't primarily the number. It's the structure. There's a version of wealth that most financial content doesn't spend enough time on. Not the accumulation side, the compression side. The idea that financial strength isn't only about bringing more in, but about systematically reducing unnecessary pressure, dependency, and friction. This distinction sounds simple. It isn't. Because everything in modern financial culture is designed to pull people in the opposite direction. We're surrounded by a definition of wealth that is almost entirely visual. The house, the car, the travel, the restaurant. And because these things are visible, they become the measuring stick. People internalize them without realizing it, and so when they think about improving their financial life, they think about earning more, so they can have more of those things. Rather than asking whether the structure underneath their life is actually producing stability, or just producing the appearance of it. Higher income does not automatically create peace. This is one of the most important and least discussed truths in personal finance. Income without structure tends to expand into consumption. Each raise gets quietly absorbed by a slightly larger apartment, a slightly more expensive car, slightly more dining out, slightly more travel, until the new income level feels exactly as tight as the old one. The lifestyle inflates to match the earnings, and the underlying pressure never really changes. The number gets bigger. The breathing room doesn't. The first habit that genuinely calm financial people tend to share is this. They maintain lower fixed pressure than you'd expect. Not lower spending necessarily, lower obligation. There's a difference between choosing to spend money on something and being contractually required to. Fixed costs, rent or mortgage, car payments, subscriptions, loan commitments, these are the floor beneath your financial life. The higher that floor, the less room you have to move. And what many people don't realize is that lifestyle inflation usually doesn't announce itself as pressure. It announces itself as progress. The bigger apartment feels like an upgrade. The newer car feels earned. And then quietly those choices become walls. The income has to keep coming in at that level or higher, or things start to collapse. Wealthy people who are genuinely calm tend to have been very deliberate about where they set that floor. Not always low, but controlled, chosen intentionally rather than drifted into. The second habit is related but distinct. They prioritize optionality over status. This one cuts against almost everything the financial culture tells us to want. Status is visible. Optionality is invisible. Status says, look at what I have. Optionality says, look at what I can do. And they are often in direct competition with each other, because building status usually means committing resources to the purchase, to the maintenance, to the image, whereas optionality means keeping resources fluid enough that you can pause, turn, or move when the situation changes. Liquidity matters far more than most people admit. Not just money in the bank, but the broader ability to change direction without catastrophic cost. Wealthy people who are financially calm often hold more in reserve than feels comfortable to people around them. They seem to underleverage when others are going all in. But what they're actually doing is buying freedom of movement. When a better opportunity appears, they can take it. When something in their life changes, a relationship, a health event, a professional shift, they have room to respond. People who have committed everything to a status-driven lifestyle don't have that room. And the absence of that room is a form of financial captivity that has nothing to do with how much they earn. The third habit is quieter and more psychological. They reduce what you might call emotional financial noise. Modern financial life is full of comparison signals. Social media has made this more acute, but the underlying pattern is old. We look at what those around us have and calibrate our own sense of sufficiency accordingly. The problem is that this calibration is almost always upward. We don't compare ourselves to people who have less. We compare to people who have more. And so the threshold for feeling financially okay keeps moving. Calm financial people tend to have genuinely disengaged from this process, not through discipline exactly, but through a kind of settled disinterest in using money to communicate identity. They make fewer purchases that are fundamentally about signaling. Not zero, but fewer. And the ones they make tend to be chosen privately, based on what actually matters to them rather than what performs well in a social context. The result is that their spending is quieter, more deliberate, and far less driven by the emotional pull of comparison. They aren't reacting to what someone else bought. They aren't soothing anxiety with a purchase. There's less noise in the system, and that silence is itself a form of financial efficiency. The fourth habit is structural in a different way. They organize their income so that not all of it depends on constant personal effort. This isn't about passive income in the oversimplified way it gets talked about online. It's about a broader relationship to how money comes in. People who remain financially pressured despite high income are often in a situation where all the income stops if they stop. One salary, one client base, one job. And that singular dependency creates a fragility that income level alone cannot fix. Calm financial people tend over time to build towards something more distributed. Ownership in something, a second income stream, assets that participate in the economy in ways that don't require daily attention. The goal isn't ease exactly, it's reduced dependency. Less of a single point of failure. And with that comes a different quality of confidence, because the floor beneath them is being held up by more than one thing. Historically, this is actually what wealth has always meant at its core. In almost every era, in almost every culture, the mark of genuine financial strength wasn't extravagant consumption, it was reduced dependence. The ability to say no, the ability to wait, the ability to make decisions from a position of security rather than urgency. Visible wealth came later, often as a consequence, but autonomy was the substance. That's the thing that got lost somewhere in the modern translation. And here's why it got lost. Modern economies are built partly on consumption. Advertising, culture, media, they're all invested in translating income into spending as quickly and consistently as possible. Visible consumption is stimulating. It provides a narrative. It gives people something to show, something to work toward, something to feel. Quiet structural stability doesn't photograph well. It doesn't make a compelling story, but it produces a life with far less pressure. There are 3 misunderstandings worth naming clearly. The first is thinking wealth means the freedom to spend freely, when in reality, the freedom most worth having is the freedom to stop, to pause, to choose without financial fear. The second is confusing income level with financial control. You can have significant income and very little control if the structure underneath it is fragile. And the third, perhaps the most common, is building lifestyle faster than resilience. The house, the car, the expenses of a successful seeming life, all acquired before the underlying financial foundation is actually strong enough to hold them comfortably. It's also worth saying, honestly, not every wealthy person is financially calm. There are people with significant assets who carry enormous financial anxiety, driven by ego, competition, fear of loss, or simply a personality that can't settle. And there are people with modest incomes who have arranged their life quietly and intelligently enough that they carry very little financial stress. The habits matter more than the number. The structure matters more than the income. The relationship with money matters more than the amount of it. One of the most honest signals of genuine financial strength is not visible at all. It doesn't show up in a car or a house or a vacation. It shows up in how someone responds when something goes wrong, when an unexpected bill arrives, when a professional situation changes, when life, as it always does eventually, requires flexibility. The person with true financial strength doesn't panic. There's a pause, then a decision. And underneath that pause is a life deliberately structured to allow it. That, not the visible things, not the income figure, not the lifestyle, is what quietly wealthy people are actually building. And once you see it, the entire framework of what financial success means starts to look very different. If this perspective shifted something for you, consider sharing it with someone who's caught in the income equals peace assumption. It's one of the most persistent and quietly damaging ideas in how we think about money. And conversations like this one are how it slowly changes.